Picture this. The year is 1722. A hush falls over the marble gallery as a figure emerges from the torchlit shadows, a young queen moving with the grace of a statue being pushed forward by invisible hands. Her gown drips with gold, so heavy it sways with each step like an anchor. From a distance she is perfect, ivory skin, high cheekbones, wrists like porcelain rods. But as the light catches her face, the truth leaks through the cracks. The unnatural set of her jaw, the chest that barely rises with each breath, the faint tremor that rattles the jewels at her ears. Around you, the whispers tighten. She is the child of a bloodline folded in on itself for generations. She is not just royalty. She is a relic of purity and a prisoner of its price. Before we enter the hidden chambers of history's most inbred women, if you believe the truth behind the portraits deserves to be told, like this video, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from, because these stories have crossed centuries to reach you. What follows is not the tale of crowns and romance, the oil paintings promised. This is the story of women raised as treasures and kept as captives, their beauty engineered like a rare breed, their blood guarded as if it were holy. And it is the story of how that same blood, century after century, turned against them, thinning their bones, crushing their lungs, and turning the marriage bed into a battlefield where love could not survive. You open your eyes to a world of gold. Above you, the canopy of your cradle is sewn with threads so fine they catch the light like strands of morning dew, the fabric drifting in the faint current from the chamber's high arched windows. Beyond the gauze, figures move. Women in velvet gowns heavy with embroidery, their faces pale under powder, their necks glistening with jewels that sway as they lean over you. They murmur to one another in voices low enough to keep you from waking fully, though one, perhaps your nurse, brushes a cool fingertip along your cheek and whispers a prayer under her breath. To an outsider, this nursery would seem the very picture of divine fortune. The air is scented with lavender, from sachets tucked into the corners. Sunlight spills over polished marble floors, and a silver rattle rests within your reach, its handle engraved with your family crest. You are the daughter of a queen, the firstborn princess of a house older than the memory of the kingdom itself. And in the official record, you are perfect. But the truth hovers at the edges of this beauty, unspoken but impossible to ignore for those who have seen too much. When the physicians come, not one, but three, each in black robes trimmed with gold, they do not coo over you. They lift your head, measure the distance between your temples, run a finger along your jawline. Their brows draw together. One makes a note on a piece of vellum, passing it silently to the others. You hear, faintly, the word prognathism. Another says fragilis osseum, brittle bones. The nurse glances at them sharply, as if to remind them that your mother, the queen, is seated just beyond the silk screen, listening for anything amiss. But your mother has heard such whispers before. She herself is the niece of the man who became her husband, and in this palace the family tree is a wreath, circling back on itself until no branch can grow straight. Outside these walls, in the city below, people imagine the royal nursery as a place untouched by the mortal world, a sanctuary of health, beauty, and God's favour. They believe, because they are told to believe, that the blood of kings and queens runs purer than any other. In the chapels, the priests say it is this unbroken lineage that makes you sacred, chosen. They do not see your father's jaw repeated in your tiny face, the subtle distortion that generations of cousins marrying cousins have carved into the bone. They do not hear the faint wheeze in your breath after you cry, or watch as the court physician tests your reflexes again and again, searching for signs of what they will not dare name. And yet, within the palace, there is pride. Pride that the old laws have been obeyed, that the royal blood has been kept free from the dilution of outsiders. Pride that the alliance between your parents' two branches is now sealed in you, a living emblem of the family's ancient claim. In the grand hall, a tapestry is already being woven to commemorate your birth, its threads dyed with costly pigments imported from Venice, its border lined with angels holding scrolls that declare the purity of your descent. You are displayed to the court in a ceremony so elaborate that even the slightest detail, the tilt of your head, the way your fingers curl, will be described in the letters ambassadors send back to their own monarchs. For them, you are not a child, you are a political object, a piece of evidence. But behind the jeweled doors, away from the music and the crowd, your life is smaller, more fragile. You are swaddled so tightly that your limbs cannot move freely, for the midwives believe this will shape you properly as you grow. Your food is measured, your sleep scheduled with the precision of military drills. In the corner of the nursery stands a tall cabinet locked with an iron key. Inside, jars of powdered pearl, dried herbs, and tinctures meant to strengthen your constitution. These are prepared by the same physicians who once examined your mother when she was your age, the same men who watched her grow pale and thin under the weight of duty, the same who calculated the right moment for her to be wed to a man old enough to be her father. Sometimes, late at night, the nursery is quiet enough that you can hear the bells of the cathedral in the distance, their toll rolling over the rooftops. The nurse sits by the hearth, mending lace, or humming an old lullaby from a village far from here, a place she will never return to. She looks at you differently than the others do, not as an heir, not as a proof of divine will, but as a child. When she tucks the blankets around you, her hands linger just long enough for you to feel the warmth through the layers. But even she cannot change the course set for you. In this house, blood is destiny. The winters are hardest. The palace is built of stone that sweats cold into the walls, and no amount of fire can warm the corridors entirely. Your crib is moved closer to the hearth, but the damp finds you still. Fevers come, and when they do, the physicians arrive again, their faces masks of studied calm. They bring with them instruments of brass and bone, and the bitter taste of their tonics lingers long after they've gone. You survive. You always survive. But each illness leaves you weaker, as if a little more of your life is being spent in advance. Still, the public must never know. When you are carried into the great hall on feast days, your nurse dresses you in gowns so heavy with brocade they hide the thinness of your arms, paints a flush on your cheeks to conceal your pallor. The courtiers bow, the ambassadors smile, and somewhere in the gallery an artist captures you in oil, an image that will be sent to foreign courts as proof of your family's flourishing line. No one will see the moment after, when your head droops against your nurse's shoulder and she carries you swiftly away before the tremor in your legs can betray you. From the moment of your birth, the world has been told you are perfect. And yet perfection here is not measured in health or happiness, but in the preservation of a lineage so entangled it cannot escape itself. You are the daughter of a queen and her uncle husband, the embodiment of a belief that purity is worth any cost. That cost, though, will be paid in the years to come, in your body, in your mind, and in the lives you are forced to bring into the same gilded cage. The tapestry that bears your likeness will hang for centuries in the palace, its colours fading but its message clear. Here is the child who united two lines of royal blood. It will not tell of the fevers, the brittle bones, the careful disguises. History rarely does. But in this first chapter of your life, the truth is already written in you, in the set of your jaw, in the narrowness of your chest, in the way those who love you look away when they think you cannot see. The years pass, and your world grows beyond the cradle, but not beyond the palace walls. You learn to walk under the watchful eyes of governesses who speak 3 languages but share one lesson above all others, that you are not like other children, and you must never forget it. Every step you take is in satin slippers embroidered with the crest of your house, and even the playthings placed in your hands are carved from ivory and inlaid with gold, heavy enough to remind you that nothing you touch is truly yours. Behind the curtsies and the lullabies lies an unspoken truth. You are being prepared, not for a life of your own choosing, but for a union already decided before you were born. In the council chamber, far from the echo of your footsteps, Men gather around a long table strewn with parchments and wax seals. The air is heavy with incense from the chapel next door, a symbolic nod to the church's approval of what is being discussed here. They are not debating whether you will marry, but to whom and how closely he will be related to you. The bishop reads aloud the precedents. Royal houses joined through uncle and niece, aunt and nephew, cousin and cousin, some even brother and sister, each match sanctified by papal dispensation. He quotes from Scripture, invoking the bloodlines of ancient kings and the marriages of holy forebears, his voice steady as if the sanctity of the union were beyond question. On the table beside him lies a stack of requests to Rome, petitions for permission to wed in defiance of natural law, requests that are never denied when they carry the seal of a king. This is the marriage bed of dynasties, not a place of romance but of calculation. Here, the body is a tool of diplomacy, and love is a dangerous distraction. The family's motto, inscribed in Latin above the great hall, speaks of honour, faith, and duty. But within these walls, duty is the currency, and your body will be its payment. The ministers remind your parents that your dowry is not measured in coin but in blood, blood that must remain pure, untainted by the veins of commoners or even distant nobles. The circle must be closed, and closed tightly. Every marriage that steps outside it risks weakening the claim to the throne, and for rulers who see themselves as the hand of God, such dilution is unthinkable. The truth, though, is whispered in corners where the torchlight does not reach. Servants trade stories of infants born with limbs too short to swaddle properly, of stillborn heirs carried in secret to the chapel for baptism before burial, of brides who died before their first child's christening because their bodies were too frail for childbirth. These tragedies never appear in the court's official records, erased as neatly as an inkblot on a ledger. But the midwives remember, the wet nurses remember, the palace physicians, sworn to secrecy under threat of ruin, remember. In their minds, they keep the tally of how many daughters have been buried before their 16th year, how many sons have failed to speak or walk. Still, the public face of the dynasty is one of triumph and divine favour. On feast days, processions wind through the capital, the streets lined with banners bearing the royal arms. The people cheer as the king and queen appear, their children, you among them, arranged in order of precedence, smiling with the studied ease of those who know they are being watched. You wave from the gilded carriage, your gloves concealing the stiffness in your fingers, the swelling in your knuckles that the court physician has been quietly treating with poultices. The crowd does not see the discomfort in your eyes. They see only the miracle of your family's unity, the unbroken chain of faces that look so much alike they might have been cast from a single mould. The marriage contracts are drafted long before the brides are old enough to understand them. They are written in formal, ornate language, speaking of alliances, territories, and inheritances, but never of the human beings at their centre. You are still barely into your 12th year when the first whispers reach your ears. A name, an age, a distant cousin who will one day be your husband. In the privacy of your chambers, you ask your governess why you cannot choose for yourself, why you cannot marry for love. She smiles tightly, as if to reassure you, but her eyes flicker toward the door to make sure no one is listening. Love, she says softly, is for poets. For you, there is only the crown. When the chosen match is finally announced, it is treated as a triumph of statecraft. Your betrothed is not a stranger. He is kin, someone whose face you have seen in family portraits, whose name has been spoken in the same breath as yours since you were a child. The court celebrates the union with banquets, musicians, and the tolling of every bell in the city. In the cathedral, the high altar is draped in cloth of gold, the scent of incense so thick it clings to your hair and gown. The archbishop blesses the match, invoking the examples of queens and empresses who came before you, women who bore the weight of their family's expectations and never faltered. But you know their stories. You know that many of them faltered, though the records do not admit it. Beyond the grandeur of the ceremony lies the reality of the bedchamber. The same relatives who toasted your engagement will now watch for signs that the marriage is fruitful, that you are able to produce an heir as quickly as possible. The pressure is suffocating, but in this palace failure is more dangerous than fear. You have heard of what happens when a royal marriage does not bear fruit: annulments disguised as acts of piety, accusations of witchcraft, quiet banishments to convents, and always the unspoken threat that your place can be taken by another girl with purer blood, or a stronger body, or simply better luck. In the weeks after the engagement, the palace seems to close in around you. Your lessons shift from history and music to the intricacies of court protocol, the duties of a wife, the management of a household that will be both yours and never yours at all. The women who tutor you speak in veiled language, but their meaning is clear. You will be expected to endure whatever is required to secure the succession. Pain will be a private matter, never to be shown in public. Silence will be your armor, and your most dangerous enemy will be your own heart. And yet, in the quiet hours before dawn, when the corridors are empty and the only sound is the soft crackle of the hearth, you feel the pull of a different kind of fear, not of the man you will marry, nor of the life you will be forced to lead, but of the knowledge that you are only the latest in a long chain of women bound to this fate. They were told the same words, walked the same marble halls, wore the same jewels. They smiled in the same portraits, and behind every smile lay the same truth: the marriage bed was never theirs alone. It belonged to the kingdom, and the kingdom was merciless in its demands. The day of your marriage arrives not as a sudden moment, but as the slow culmination of every breath you have taken since you were born. From the moment the morning bells begin their long toll over the rooftops of the capital, the palace becomes a hive of movement, a carefully orchestrated display meant as much for the ambassador's eyes as for God's. In your chambers, light pours through the tall windows and spills across the cold tiles, catching on the gilt edges of the mirrors that flank you on either side. Servants move around you in measured silence, fastening jewels at your ears, layering silk upon brocade upon stiffened lace until your body feels less like your own and more like a vessel, constructed, displayed, and offered. The gown is heavy enough that it presses down on your ribs, and the pearl-stitched veil casts your face in a haze that softens its lines, hides the faint sallowness of your skin, disguises the tension in your jaw. The walk to the cathedral is not far, but it stretches into an eternity. Each step echoes against the flagstones of the courtyard, mingling with the rhythmic clop of the horses that draw the royal carriage ahead of you. The air outside is sharp with the scent of pine boughs laid along the route, mingling with the smoke of the torches lit for the early hour. People press against the barricades, craning to see you, shouting blessings, calling your name. They do not see the way your hands twitch beneath your gloves, the tremor you try to hide by clutching the prayer book pressed into your palm. To them, you are the embodiment of the dynasty's triumph, a living emblem of the sacred union that will keep the bloodline unbroken. Inside the cathedral, the scent changes incense so thick it clings to your lungs, beeswax candles burning in vast banks that cast golden light up the carved stone ribs of the vaults. The high altar gleams with gold leaf and gemstones. The choir's voices swell and fill the space, their harmonies as precise as the rows of courtiers watching from their appointed seats. Your betrothed stands at the altar, a man whose face you have seen in portraits since your childhood, but whose eyes now measure you not as a cousin, but as property. He offers his hand and you take it, your fingers stiff in his grip. The archbishop's voice rolls over the assembled crowd, intoning blessings that speak of divine will, of the sanctity of your union, of the children who will be your duty to bear. When the vows are spoken, when the rings are placed, when the applause surges like a wave through the pews, it is not joy that takes root in you. It is the cold certainty that something irreversible has been set in motion. You walk back down the nave with your new husband at your side. the faces of your family and the foreign envoys blurring into a tapestry of approval. Each pair of eyes another knot tying you to the path laid before you. The wedding feast is a theatre of excess. Tables groan under the weight of roasted peacocks with feathers restored and gilded, sugar sculptures of mythical beasts, wines from the oldest cellars. Laughter and music fill the hall, and yet all of it seems to you like a noise played to distract from the narrow tunnel ahead. Toasts are made not to your happiness, but to your fertility, to the future heirs you will produce. Even in the moments when you are not being directly addressed, you feel the eyes. Those of your mother who once stood in your place. Those of your father who has invested his political capital in your womb. Those of the ministers who will measure your worth in the swelling of your belly. In the days after the ceremony, the grandeur falls away and the reality of your new life reveals itself. The apartments you now occupy are richly furnished but colder than the nursery you left behind. The bed is vast, draped in silk, the air heavy with the lingering scent of incense from the wedding mass. At night, when the corridors outside are empty, you hear your husband's steps approaching, the measured sound of leather on stone. What passes between you in those hours is not romance, but an act carried out with the same precision as the signing of a treaty. There is no space for gentleness, no recognition of your youth beyond the mechanical need to prepare you for what is expected. The palace physicians, discreet but ever present, mark the days, counting the weeks, measuring the cycle of your body as if it were the workings of a clock. Your own health, already fragile, begins to bear the strain. The fevers that once visited you in childhood return more often. You tire easily. Your appetite diminishes, and yet the pressure does not relent. There is talk, thinly veiled, about the urgency of producing an heir quickly before your body becomes too frail, before the alliance loses its momentum. In private, you are given tonics to strengthen you, draughts to quicken the blood, prayers to whisper before you sleep. The older women of the court, some of them your aunts, speak to you in hushed tones about endurance, about the need to smile even when your strength wanes, about the danger of letting anyone suspect weakness. In the midst of this, moments of your girlhood still cling stubbornly to you. An old doll tucked away in a cedar chest, the scent of lavender that your nurse once used to soothe you, the memory of watching snowfall from a nursery window. These memories surface without warning, bringing with them a pang of loss so sharp it makes your chest ache. Yet you learn to bury them, to lock them away as tightly as the court locks away any sign of failure. And always the portraits are being painted. The artists are summoned to capture you in oils, to commit to canvas the image of a princess turned consort whose duty is clear, whose beauty is intact, whose lineage is beyond reproach. They paint you with roses in your cheeks, with pearls in your hair, with a composure that belies the truth. No brush will ever record the trembling in your hands, the bruises at your hips, the dull ache that settles in your bones. Outside the palace, the people see only the image. They hear only the proclamations and the tolling of bells that mark anniversaries and celebrations. They will never walk the narrow corridors you tread each day, never feel the press of expectations that weigh heavier than the crown you will one day wear. They will not hear the conversations whispered late at night, the questions asked in half-sentences, has she quickened yet? Has the marriage taken root? The irreversible birthright is not only the title you carry, it is the reality that your life's course was fixed long before you drew your first breath. And as the months pass, as your body bends and strains under the demands placed upon it, you begin to understand that there will be no turning back. The path ahead narrows with each step, and though the tapestries in the great hall depict queens who appear serene and untroubled, you know now what their eyes concealed. You know that once the crown claims you, it never lets you go. The first pregnancy comes quickly, as the council hoped, but it is not accompanied by joy. From the moment the physicians confirm it, you cease to be spoken of as a person, and become instead a vessel, a living reliquary carrying the dynasty's most sacred relic. Your days are rearranged into a sequence of inspections and prescriptions, every meal weighed, every movement observed. The midwives move around you with the same solemnity as priests preparing an altar, adjusting your position, urging you to remain in bed, pressing cool cloths to your forehead when the waves of nausea turn your skin the colour of parchment. The air in your chambers is heavy with the smell of boiled linen and the sharp tang of tinctures steeped in brass pots. The bells of the cathedral sound each hour, marking time that no longer feels your own, and every toll reminds you that somewhere in the palace your husband and his advisers are counting down the weeks until they can claim success. But the pregnancy is difficult. The fragility written in your bones from birth asserts itself in ways the physicians struggle to control. Swelling overtakes your ankles until you cannot walk without assistance. Headaches throb so violently that the light through the windows feels like knives. At night, you lie awake, the weight of the child pressing against your spine, and you remember the whispered stories you once overheard, of royal brides whose bodies failed them, who bled out in birthing chambers, whose names were spoken in court only as cautionary shadows. You begin to understand that your life, like theirs, will be measured not in years, but in the heirs you produce and the state of your womb when you leave it. When the child comes, it is after 3 days of labour that unravel you into something unrecognizable. The room is crowded with the necessary witnesses, physicians, midwives, a confessor murmuring prayers, ladies of the court stationed to verify the legitimacy of the heir. The air is hot, thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and burning tallow. You are aware only of the pain, the unrelenting pressure as your body struggles to perform the duty it was shaped for, but not built to endure. And when at last the child emerges, slick and silent, there is a moment of unbearable stillness. Then the midwife lifts her head and announces a son, and the room exhales in relief. You are too weak to see him before he is taken to be wrapped and blessed, and in that absence a deep, cold fear blooms, that he will grow to carry the same fragility, the same hidden flaws, and that you will have condemned him to the same path. Recovery is slow, and it is not recovery in any true sense, for no sooner have your wounds begun to heal than talk begins again of the next child. You are told that your duty to the throne requires more than one heir, the future is uncertain, and accidents happen. The cycle begins anew, the tonics, the examinations, the long hours of confinement. Each time, your body breaks a little further. Teeth loosen in your jaw, your back curves under the strain, your hair thins until it must be woven with false strands before you appear in public. The portraits painted of you now are more elaborate, the gowns heavier with embroidery to disguise the hollowness beneath. But the artists know the truth in the tilt of your shoulders, the way the light must be softened to hide the gauntness of your cheeks. Outside the palace walls, the kingdom is told only of the celebrations, the baptisms, the feast days, the anniversaries of your marriage. They are told that you are a devoted wife, a pious mother, a queen in all but name. They do not see the quiet funerals when an infant fails to survive, the hurried processions down the cloister to a side chapel where the bells are not rung and the streets are not told to gather. These losses are treated as inconveniences to be endured, steps backward in the long march towards securing the dynasty's future. In private, they are your undoing. You lie awake in the long hours before dawn, staring at the canopy above your bed, tracing the embroidered vines with your eyes and feeling them tighten like cords around your ribs. Your husband ages faster than you imagined, the years of power settling into his face in lines that deepen with each campaign, each treaty. But his demands do not diminish. He visits you as regularly as the council advises, his manner businesslike, the act stripped of tenderness. There is no question of refusal. Refusal would be treason against the bloodline itself. The palace, with its corridors and chambers, becomes a labyrinth of expectation. No door opens onto freedom, only onto another room where someone is waiting to measure, to advise, to remind you of the stakes. In the rare moments you are allowed to walk in the gardens, you feel the strangeness of the outside air, the way it moves without the scent of incense or boiled herbs. You watch the younger women of the court stroll in laughter, their cheeks flushed with health, their eyes unshadowed by the weight you carry. Some of them will be chosen, as you were chosen, and you find yourself looking at them, not with envy, but with a sorrow so deep it feels like a second spine. A structure that holds you upright even as it aches with every step. Your health begins to falter in ways that cannot be easily disguised. The fevers return more often, leaving you drenched and shivering. An ache settles in your hips that no poultice or prayer can lift. You hear your name spoken in the council chamber with a tone you recognize, the same tone once used for your mother in her later years when she could no longer fulfill what the dynasty required. You wonder if they are already considering your replacement, if there is another young cousin being prepared, even now, for the marriage bed that has consumed you. And yet, in public, the image holds. You stand beside your husband at ceremonies, your gown a fortress of brocade, your jewels catching the torchlight. You smile in the precise, restrained way you were taught, your hand resting lightly on the shoulder of the son who has survived. The people cheer, the ambassadors nod, and the chroniclers record another year of stability for the realm. They do not see the tremor that runs through your arm, the way your breath shortens when the speeches run long, the shadow in your gaze when you look at the child and know that you have passed on not only your title, but the flaws that came with it. Again and again you return to the bedchamber, to the silks and the shadows, to the unspoken bargain you struck by being born into this family. The marriage of blood and bone has consumed your youth, reshaped your body, and hollowed the spaces of your mind where hope once lived. And still, the crown demands more. It is winter when your body finally begins to fail in ways no court physician can conceal. The fevers do not break as they once did. They linger for days, turning your skin to wax and your breath to shallow whispers. The ache in your hips becomes a gnawing pain that keeps you from standing for long without support. And the faint tremor in your hands grows into a visible shudder that no jewel or glove can disguise. The palace is kept warm with roaring fires, yet you shiver beneath layers of furs. Servants move quietly in your chambers now, their eyes lowered, their steps muffled, as though the sound itself might hasten your decline. There is no talk of another child, no whispered prayers for fertility. Only the unspoken acknowledgement that your body has given all it can give and more than it ever should have been asked to. Outside, the kingdom still believes in the vision that has been so carefully preserved. On feast days they hear the bells ring for your appearance. They see you in the balcony wrapped in velvet and pearls, your face powdered to conceal the hollows, your lips painted to mimic the flush of health. The crowd cheers, and for a fleeting moment the illusion holds. The dynasty appears strong, unbroken, eternal. But within the palace walls, the truth circulates in murmured conversations. You cannot walk the length of the gallery without stopping to rest. You eat little, you sleep less, and there are days when you do not rise at all. When death comes, it is not sudden. It creeps into your body with the same inevitability that shaped your life, a slow tightening of the circle. In the final days, your chambers are filled with the low murmur of prayers and the bitter scent of medicinal herbs burning in bronze braziers. The confessor sits beside your bed, reading softly from scripture, his voice a steady drone that blurs into the hum of the wind against the window panes. Your son is brought to you, his small hand cool in yours, his eyes wide with the uncomprehending fear of a child who knows he is losing something he cannot name. You look at him and see not only his future as heir, but the shadow of your own life, etched faintly in his features. The shape of the jaw, the delicate bones, the same narrowness in the shoulders. The end is marked by ritual, not by grief. Once the breath leaves your body, the physicians and attendants move with practiced efficiency. The curtains are drawn, the mirrors covered, the candles replaced with taller unburnt tapers. Your body is washed and anointed, the skin pale and smooth beneath their hands. They note, without speaking aloud, the signs of the years, the curve in the spine, the looseness of the teeth, the brittleness of the nails. These observations will not be written into any official record. They will be carried in silence, passed between physicians like an inherited truth too dangerous to set down. When you are dressed for the last time, it is in the gown you wore on your wedding day, the silk yellowed slightly with age, but restored in places with fresh embroidery. Jewels are fastened at your throat and wrists, a crown set lightly upon your head. To the public, your lying in state will be a display of dignity and triumph, the peaceful repose of a queen whose life was one of service and divine purpose. They will file past your bier, heads bowed, and see only the smooth mask of your face, not the years of suffering that shaped it. In the vaults below the cathedral, where generations of your family lie, a place has been prepared. Your coffin is carried through the streets in a procession flanked by guards in polished armor, banners trailing black crape in the winter wind. The people kneel as you pass, scattering petals on the frozen cobblestones, murmuring prayers for your soul. The chroniclers will write of the sorrow of the nation, of the unity of the court, of the seamless transfer of duty to the next in line. They will not write of the genetic toll that hollowed your bones, of the stillbirths buried without names, of the way the bloodline has thinned itself toward collapse. And yet history has a way of remembering what the court would rather it forget. Centuries later, when the vault is opened for restoration, scholars will study the remains. They will measure the bones, note the malformations of the jaw, the signs of chronic anemia, the evidence of joint disease. They will compare these findings with others from your lineage and trace the unmistakable pattern, the narrowing of the gene pool, the repetition of traits that once were celebrated as marks of purity but are now understood as the harbingers of decline. The truth that was hidden behind silk and ceremony will be written plainly in the language of science. This dynasty's end was written in the bones of its queens long before its thrones were lost. The portraits of you will remain in galleries, their pigments preserved, their frames gleaming. In them, you will always be the serene young bride, the devoted consort, the mother of the heir. Tour guides will speak of your beauty, your grace, the golden age of the court in which you lived. Few will linger on the reality, though the clues are there for anyone who looks closely. The set of your jaw, the slight asymmetry in the eyes, the painter's choice to soften certain features while sharpening others. Your legacy is not only in the son who inherits the throne or the treaties secured through your marriage. It is in the cautionary tale whispered by historians and geneticists alike, in the understanding that purity, when guarded too fiercely, becomes a kind of slow poison. The crown that sat so heavily upon your head will pass to others, but the flaws it concealed will remain, carried forward until the line itself can no longer bear its own weight. In the end, the story of your life is the story of a system that valued blood over breath, lineage over life. It is the story of a body shaped by centuries of the same names written beside one another in marriage registers, of a childhood spent in the shadow of duty, of a womanhood consumed in the effort to create heirs who would inherit not only a kingdom, but the same quiet doom. The palace walls that once enclosed you will stand for generations, their stones weathered but enduring, much like the myth of your perfection. But in the silent chambers of the archives, in the unblinking gaze of history, the truth will remain. The dark legacy of pure bloodlines is not written in the coronation oaths or the state proclamations. It is written in the bones, and the bones do not lie.